Fatherhood isn't easy, but in Autismland, it's a journey like no other. Join Mark Grasse as we explore the highs, lows, and everything in between of raising children on the autism spectrum. With real stories, practical advice, and a touch of humor, we're here to navigate this unique journey together. For dads navigating life on the autism spectrum, you're not alone.
I'm Mark Grasse, and welcome to the Dads in Autismland podcast. I am the proud father of two sons, Declan and Damien. Damien is our autistic son. He's fairly autistic, 12 years old, and we've known since about 18 months old, and that's what I'm going to discuss today. Now, I know this topic could be sensitive, and you may, as an autism father, may have received this question from, other parents who may be of autism or not of autism or don't even have kids. It's just something that people are really curious about. So I know this can be sensitive, but I would encourage you to be open to it and consider it as an educational opportunity for people when they ask. Now, how I'm going to discuss this, and the journey is very different. I'm going to say that all the time. If you know somebody with autism, you know one person with autism. It's a different journey almost every single time. So please understand that this is just my personal journey, and yours may be very different, and you may even disagree on how we handled the process. But at the end of the day, it's our son and it's our journey, just like it's your journey. And I encourage you to, again, just reflect on it. And if you do get this question, don't be offended by it. And again, use it as a learning opportunity for other people. Now, I will say that early intervention is a great thing. If you can understand what the situation is sooner, the sooner you could seek professional help, the sooner you could start therapy, the sooner you do it, the better the outcome could possibly be. As they develop, the sooner they're in the therapies and you're kind of handling the situation as a autism situation versus a neurotypical situation, the better progress you're making, the faster you could get results. In regards to early intervention, I want to cover just a few of the early signs that we saw, which are the most vital time when you start to realize things are different. And, it did take us a while. We kind of started the process. And, some of us thought he was possibly autistic or just different from other children earlier on, some of our family members. I was kind of a late person because, one, it was our first child. I didn't know a lot, and I definitely didn't know a lot about special needs. And so, I was kind of like, well, some kids develop differently. That was kind of my response initially was, hey, some kids are slower than others or late bloomers. And you may get that response as well, but there were some signs. And so I'm going to start by just kind of going over the early signs that we experienced in the early years. You may see these, you might not. He is hyposensitive, my son Damien. So it's key to understand that if you do have a hypersensitive autistic child, it's a much different process. He showed signs, and by hyposensitive, I mean that he craved input. And so he likes pressure, he likes noise, he likes sound, he likes smell. I'm going to talk about how some of those manifested in kind of the signs of autism, but it's very different. So typical, or not even, there's no typical autistic children, but hypersensitive autistic children may do the exact opposite of the things he does. So don't consider it as this is the one way it is. It's just our way and my son's unique journey that he's on. So let's just talk about the early signs, ages 0 to 2. And there were some physical indicators that we noticed. Typically when we first had him, he slept through the night. My wife thinks it was like 6 weeks. I think it was a little bit earlier. I think it was like 2 weeks that he was kind of sleeping through the night. And, we just thought we were amazing parents. We thought that everybody had overblown the difficulty of children. As our first child, we don't know anything. But he was sleeping through the night, and we thought it was amazing. He would sleep in restaurants. He would sleep everywhere, and it was great. We were just like, he's just the best baby ever. We're great parents. Here we go. That's that actually could be an indicator. But at that time, the first few months, we had no idea of what was going on. Now, when he did and I'm just going to kind of bounce around to different stories just to give you some ideas of how it went. But when he did start to show signs, there were things like an indifference to dirty diapers. Like he would have a wet diaper, he'd have a poopy diaper, and he wouldn't even he wouldn't cry. There was zero indication. And at the time, again, we just thought, oh, that's unusual. Now, once we had our second son, and our second son, Declan, came 10 months after Damien, then we had that comparison, and so that was another thing that we started to notice. But let me not get ahead of myself. We also noticed that he had extreme pain tolerance. There's a couple instances. The one I remember the most was when he was about 2 years old, and or maybe it was a little earlier, but he was walking, and we were at a park, and just 10 feet away, we're in Texas. He found a fire ant pile, and by the time I realized, I'm like, why is he stomping around like that? I ran over, and he was just covered in like 100 ants, and I ran over, picked him up, took him away from the ant pile, brushed him off. He had been bit like 100 times, was not screaming, wasn't even upset. On the other hand, I wasn't screaming, but I did get bit maybe like 7 times, and I had sepsis. I had to go to the hospital the next day, the ER, and get shots for that. So that was another indicator that something was a little bit different with him. He also had extreme tolerance to temperature, specifically cold. We take trips to California, where we're from, quite often. And back then, I think and again, he was starting to walk. We were in the Pacific Ocean in January, and we're all bundled up, but he was out in the water. He was walking out there, and that was another key sign that, like, he also had an obsession with water in general. We couldn't keep him away. And even I remember when he was a really young baby, maybe like 9 months or so, you put him in his little floaty, and he'd be, in the a pool, and if there was any kind of bubbles, he would just stare at the bubbles, wouldn't even move, just stare at the bubbles. And then he over time, he developed kind of an obsession with water, where we, enrolled him in swim lessons because we just couldn't keep him away. If there was any body of water, pool, lake, river, whatever it was, like, he's going to find a way down there. And so again, that kind of obsessive behavior was another indicator. So we, of course, put him swim lessons. And after about the 12-month mark, we started, and I'm bouncing around a little bit, but bear with me. At the 12-month mark, and we were going through all of our regular doctor visits. First time parents. My wife was excellent about making sure that we went to every single doctor appointment. And at 12 months, we actually found that she was already falling behind slightly, and so he wasn't stacking blocks. He wasn't picking up Cheerios. Kind of these key indicators of like motor skill movements, and he started missing those at about 12 months. Also, between 12 and 18 months, maybe a little sooner, he did start saying words. He said, "Mama, Dada." I think he had like one other. I need to remember what it is. But he stopped at about 18 months, and they started to regress. And then he actually started to show signs of extreme lethargy, where he, when he was earlier, he would love going to parties. He loved going anywhere. He's always smiley. He was always, wanting to be picked up. And then that kind of stopped as well. He would lay down on shelves if he went to Target. He, was always laying on things, and he just wasn't moving very much. And that was, again, another kind of early indicator that he may have been, different. And then again, we had our other son, Declan, who is neurotypical, other than the first 4 months where he had colic and was screaming the whole time. And again, Damien, he slept really well up until like 2. And then his sleep patterns change as well. But we also had this comparison between Declan and Damien, and Declan was, just on track. He was on track with all the normal milestones, and Damien was continuing to miss. And so around that 18-month mark, we started talking about autism. Like, okay, this is different. I was still, I hate to say, I was still skeptical. I was like, well, kids develop at different times. Like, are we being discriminatory, or are we, trying to take a standard and just simply apply it to our son? And so it was a difficult, realization that we had, where it's like, oh, well, he is different. And And then my wife started going to, the medical journey, and that involved hearing tests, involved, sedation for tests. We actually initially, before we were still talking about autism, but we thought, oh, maybe he just can't hear. Maybe he's having hearing difficulty. Now, since he wasn't responding to typical hearing tests, and you could give hearing tests to babies where they'll move, they'll obviously hear something and indicate that they move. He never responded to any of those, and so we thought, okay, well, maybe he's deaf. So since he wasn't responding to the typical test, we had to get surgery where they put him under, and then they had to go and test his to see if his eardrums were actually functioning. And it turns out they were, so he could hear. So that was another kind of like, okay, it's not that. Now between 2 and 3, we did start going to the neurologist, and my wife was pretty convinced at that point, like he's probably autistic or somewhere on the spectrum. But since he was actually very well behaved, if he had whatever thing he was kind of obsessed with at the time, it was like an iPad. And so she'd go to the doctor, he'd have an iPad, and he would sit there and he makes eye contact. And again, just like all autistic kids, like some just show different signs, and eye contact or lack of eye contact is usually an indicator of autism, but he made eye contact. And so that was kind of like checked off the list. He didn't look different in terms of like his behavior around the neurologist. And so she said, okay, well, we need to do all the tests. And so we did EEG tests, we did sleep studies, we did genetic testing, we did metabolic testing. And a lot of those turned up pretty normal. And so my wife just kept on going back. And then finally, I think he was around 3. She went to the visit and his iPad died, and he just didn't have the device that typically kept him happy when we went places. And he just lost it and just he showed all of the signs, because also back then he wasn't stemming either. And stemming is the arm flapping and a few different indicators that, again, typical autism shows. He wasn't doing any of that, but then when he lost his device, he just flipped. And so after my wife had gone through, we both gone through, but she was the principal one doing this, a year of tests, the neurologist said, "Oh, autistic." And she even said, like, well, if he had done that initially, I would have given you a diagnosis then. And so then finally got the diagnosis, and we were able to start making progress. But yeah, again, the testing was essentially to eliminate all other possibilities, Fragile X, the hearing, the even seizures. We had to do I think this is just 5 years ago, we did a overnight EEG test where he had this essentially a helmet on. And if you know autistic kids, and even though he is hyposensitive, he does not like things on his head. And we had to sit with him in this in this hospital room, and it was taking readings the whole time. And that, again, it showed some things, but it wasn't a true indicator. So anyways, the tests there's no test for autism. There's only elimination of other things at this point. Hopefully eventually there will be a test, but just know that it could be a long journey. It could be, for us, year plus of tests and kind of unpleasantness. So I hate to say it, but you may have to go through that if you're thinking your child's autistic, or if you're an autism dad, the amount of tests that you have to do is pretty extensive. So let me just cover the kind of key points that I want to cover in this. When did you know? Because it wasn't a black or white. There was a lot of uncertainty. There was the emotional impact of telling family members and maybe their doubt about whether autism or not, oh, late bloomer. That's the typical one. And it does take a toll on you. And it especially took a toll on my wife, because she was the one that was, around him all the time and was pretty convinced, especially when compared to our neurotypical son, Declan, that Damien was autistic. You're going to go through a lot, to figure it out before you kind of get help and really know a direction. And that's any part of life, really, where if you're uncertain of what something is, you're not all in You can't be all in. There's no path when you don't know. And so, we went through a lot. We went through a lot of sleep deprivation. When he really started showing signs, he went from sleeping through the night to waking up between 1 and 5 a.m. for about 3 years. And solid 3 years of that's just was our life. And we basically switched off to handle who was watching him at night. But again, another indicator. And yeah, the emotional toll, not sleeping, I would say is torture. And there's years of my life where I'm just like, it's all mushed together because I wasn't sleeping at all. But again, if you can share this duty, understand that it's hard on both of you if you have a spouse, and it's okay. Just share it. It sucks. It's going to be unpleasant. Maybe you're both tired and you're both cranky, but just know that this is all for your child and it's all worth it in the end. And the more you can support each other, the better. And if you could get help from anybody and help them understand the situation, they're going to be able to help a lot more. There is again, I'm going to touch on the early intervention. Do whatever you can to figure it out. If you think there's a problem, try to figure it out. Keep on going to the doctor. Keep on asking questions. Keep on doing the research. Keep on talking to autism parents, and just try to go. And you'll get a lot of suggestions. That's another aspect. I'll probably cover this on a different episode of the suggestions about to fix autism, and then that could be really offensive. So I'll cover that on a different topic. But just know a lot of people, and it's actually an indicator that they want to help. So if you do have people that are kind of shoving solutions in your face, try not to be offended by it. Say thank you. And, if you're an autism parent, you probably tried everything. It's part of the process, and trying everything isn't bad either. Just keep on trying. Each one of these children is really unique, and they have a unique solution that you're going to have to figure out. But yeah, the sooner you start, the better. Now there is another big tip that I'd like to recommend. Figure out a structure. For us, specifically on the sleep deprivation issue, we had to come up with a routine in our routine, and no judgment, on anybody's routine, and please don't judge ours. But we had to figure it out. And our solution ended up being How I Met Your Mother, the sitcom. Now they were too young to understand what that show was about. And now I go back and watch, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much bad stuff in that show. But they were just young children. They couldn't even understand what was happening. But he really liked the faces and the loudness. And so what we found was we'd have to sit there on our couch, all of us, and basically watch this show and wait for him to fall asleep on the couch, at which point I would pick him up and carry him to bed very slowly so he won't wake up. And that was our routine. And then he would wake up later on. But that was it. And it took us months, maybe even a year of testing, like different, how do we get him to go to bed? But eventually it pays off. And that's a lot of what you're going to experience with autism is it's just repetition, it's structure, and it's creating routines. And the more for Damien, at least, that we could create a structure and a routine and just follow that, even if it seems like, oh, it shouldn't be this way. No, there's no rules in this situation. If with neurotypical children, yes, saying a set structure that you create is fine. Do that. Autistic children, just do your best. Figure it out. Now, those solutions end, which is another thing I'll touch on later, is that kind of evolution into he's now a 170-pound person. But he was light enough where I could literally pick him up, even in a 2-story house, carry him up the stairs. But I remember, and I'll talk about this in a different episode, but I remember at the point where I was like, I can't keep doing this. He's like 100 pounds. Like it's getting really difficult. It's getting kind of dangerous to carry somebody up the stairs like that. And so we had to figure out another solution, but we'll talk about evolving routines eventually. So my practical advice for this is to get professional evaluations. Yes, you could go naturalistic. Yes, you could have tips and advice that you show people, but get professional evaluations. Like if nothing else, it will help you qualify for insurance benefits or other benefits if those ever become available. And you just want to know. And it's just another avenue. Don't treat it as right or wrong. Just treat it as another potential solution. But the professionals, in terms of being able to, talk the talk about your son or daughter's situation, these people will provide you really good advice, especially the neurologists are kind of key to the situation. Start therapies early. Don't be afraid. Don't judge the situation. Don't even judge the solutions. And this is something I do personally where I'm like, hey, if I have a problem, I obviously don't know the solution. And so I'm obviously incapable of judging any solution. I just don't know. And so I suggest to take the same thing and try the therapies, try different therapies, figure out what works. Sleep routines, probably the most important thing you could do for your health and the health of your autistic child. Figure out sleep routines, like just whatever it takes. Try different things, try different methods, but start to figure out a routine. And then if you can, start to duplicate that routine night after night. And that's how we got results. The responsibility, sharing responsibilities. Yes, for you may have a job or your spouse may have a job, but at the end of the day, it's you can't do everything on your own, and you can't expect your partner to do everything on your own. So the more that you can share the responsibilities, even if it's difficult, and maybe they'll say like, "No, I know how to do this," still you got to step up and you got to try and you got to and do the research for how to handle this conversation of, hey, we both need to be in this, because the more you're in this, the better it's going to go when you start sharing responsibilities. So therapies, we went through quite a few of them, just to give you some idea of what it took. Now initially it was out of pocket, and especially when we thought he may have been deaf, or just had a speech delay, we actually started occupational therapy and speech therapy. We had an awesome in-home therapist come to us, Amanda at River Kids, and she's still here in Austin, so look her up if you need help. But that was out of pocket expense, and so that was before insurance. And then we got into ABA therapy here in Austin. We went to a few different clinics. Currently, we're at Central Texas Autism Center. Fantastic. Again, I'll probably do a whole episode just about the big difference that has made in our lives. But that's just a few of the therapies. We also did physical therapy, and we did in-home physical therapy with a woman named Meredith, who we still go to, and she's at Fortis, which is a nonprofit that I definitely recommend that you look up. They're over in Dripping Springs, but that's just a few of the therapies. And you just, again, when it comes to solutions, you just got to try a bunch. Those were the ones that we tried, and there's a few others, but those were the primary. And just to touch on the, if you think there's a problem with your child, even if you don't think they're autistic, or you think they may have a speech development issue, I'm a product of speech therapy. I actually couldn't pronounce the letter R until I was like 8, I want to say. My parents put me in like 5 different therapies to fix the problem. And it was completely worth it. So neurotypical or autistic speech therapy, if you think there's a speech issue, take care of it as soon as possible. And again, I'm going to harp on this, but go to professionals and find out what they say. Don't diagnose it yourself if you haven't talked to a professional first. And just get the advice, be open to everything. So therapies, try it all, see how it goes and see what the response is, and stick with it, just to find out if it could be an effective solution for you. And finally, just structure in general. Coming up with routines and structure and this repetition. Our son's one of his major issues is retention of information, and so the more we kind of say, hey, this is when this happens, then this happens, then this happens, it gets you in the routine. And if you want something like sleep, then the more you could start to adjust these, the better. So again, just to kind of wrap this up, and I know I talked about like, hey, this is a huge topic, and we are going to cover this on future episodes. But with this episode, again, I'm just trying to tell you the start of the journey and the start of diagnosis, and just kind of what it took. And it was not easy, but you continue, just keep on fighting for it. Look for those early signs. Look for those unique moments, like the anthill story. That was kind of a key indicator for me. Like, okay, this is different. A typical child would have been screaming their head off. My child is either a superhero or there's something else, and he is a superhero to me. But it's an indicator, and you definitely want to consider that when you're talking to, especially medical professionals. The medical journey could be very difficult, but do not give up. Do not stop. I thank God that my wife never stopped. She just kept on going. And it didn't matter what they said. We still thought there was an issue. And she just kept on trying until we were able to get the diagnosis and start our journey in terms of helping our son with autism. And that's pretty much it. But if it's so hard. I'm gonna say it a million times, but you can't stop. You have to be vigilant. You have to look for the signs, and you have to not be satisfied if you think there's still a problem that's not being handled. It's your responsibility, and it's for the good of your child and the good of your family. Because if you don't handle the situation early, if you push it off and you wait, then it's not going to improve, and there's a good potential to get much worse. And you have to consider, and for us, with Damien especially, because he's, I'm like 6'2" and like 200 pounds, which is pretty good size, but he's on track to be like 6'5" and like 300 pounds. And so we have to consider like, okay, yes, this behavior is okay for him as a small child. Is it going to be okay for him as a 6'5", 300-pound 18-year-old? And so again, a unique situation with us, but we saw that. We're like, he's going to be huge. We do not want him having issues with law enforcement, with people who, he's misbehaving around because he's autistic and doesn't know how to behave. It could be very dangerous. And so definitely consider that as well. They're not going to be this age forever. Yes, children could be disruptive, but if you think there's a problem, then get help and try and ask our community, our growing community. I meet autistic dads all the time, and it's incredible. Lean on them, just ask questions, and don't be shy about it. Don't be embarrassed about it, because it's your child, and there's really nothing that matters more than that. So thank you for tuning into this episode. Hopefully, I provide some insights into the journey, how to answer that question. When did you know? You could probably go into less detail than I just did. But it takes a while. You could say, oh, we thought early at 18 months, but we didn't get the diagnosis until 3-4. Totally typical, but you don't want that diagnosis at 12 or 18 or whenever it could be. So keep that in mind, be vigilant, ask for help, and please let us know if this helped or if we could have added more information. Again, this is our personal journey, so no judgment on your personal journey or if it was very different from yours. Just know that it's all of our own personal journeys when it comes to Autismland.